It has always seemed to me that among the many singular affairs in which I accompanied my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes there are some which by reason of their delicate nature could not at the time be given to the public. Years have passed since those days in Baker Street, and many of the actors in that strange drama, which I have chosen to call the adventure of the wedding gallery, are now beyond the reach of earthly scandal.
I am therefore at liberty to set down the facts as they occur, trusting that the lapse of time will blunt any edge that the story might otherwise possess.
It was in the autumn of the year when the first nip of frost had begun to whiten the curbstones of London, and a yellow fog lay low upon the river. I had returned for a few days from my practice to visit my old quarters in Baker Street and to enjoy, at rarest of pleasures, the society of Holmes when his mind was in full working order and untroubled by the heavier clouds which at times overshadowed it. I found him, as so often before, seated in his armchair in dressing gown and slippers, with his long thin legs extended towards the fender and the morning paper strewn in a semicircle upon the floor. His keen grey eyes were fixed not upon the columns before him, but upon the wreaths of tobacco smoke which curled slowly towards the ceiling. The familiar odour of his favourite tobacco mingled with the smell of coffee and the faint chemical tang which clung to our old room from many a past experiment.
Mrs. Hudson had but that instant removed the breakfast tray, and I had taken my accustomed chair opposite him when he flicked the ash from his pipe and held out a folded newspaper.
You will observe, Watson, that the world continues to revolve quite independently of our personal convenience.
I took the paper from his hand and glanced at the paragraph to which his long forefinger directed me. It was headed in large type with the word scandal in allegation, and beneath it there followed a brief but pungent account of a situation which might well have had European consequences. A certain Mr. Julius Merrow, described as a diplomatic secretary attached to the Varovian legation in London, was stated to be upon the eve of celebrating a distinguished alliance with a lady of high birth from his own country. At the very moment when these nuptials were in preparation, a young Englishwoman named Miss Alice Harbury had stepped forward with the assertion that she was already the lawful wife of Mr. Merrow. In support of her claim, she produced a marriage certificate bearing the date of 2 years before and purporting to be signed at a suburban registry office. The document was said to have been examined by experts and pronounced genuine, and as the Varovian minister had not been previously informed of any such alliance, the affair threatened to become extremely awkward. The final sentence stated that the matter had been placed in the hands of the authorities, but that out of regard for international considerations, great discretion would be exercised.
I laid down the paper with some exclamation of surprise.
The situation, as sketched in those brief lines, was sufficiently curious, but I confess that at that time I did not see wherein it could particularly interest my friend. Holmes, however, had resumed his pipe, and was regarding me with that half-quizzical, half-introspective expression which I had learned to associate with the birth of some new chain of reasoning.
Well, Watson, what impression do you gather from this somewhat meagre recital?
It seems to me, said I, to be one of those unfortunate entanglements which arise when a gentleman of position indulges his fancy in quarters where he has no right to do so.
A very proper moral judgment, no doubt, but I was asking rather for your opinion upon the facts than upon the ethics.
The woman brings forward a certificate, which experts believe to be genuine, I answered, and the gentleman denies that he has ever married her, so one of them is lying, and the paper must be either honest or forged.
You state the problem with admirable simplicity, said he, and you will admit that it presents a certain interest when the gentleman in question is an officer of a foreign state, and the lady is a governess without influential connections.
You think then that the matter is likely to come within our orbit?
I do not think, Watson, I know. You may have observed that the paragraph mentions the authorities but refrains from naming them. I have reason to believe that the particular authority invoked is a certain energetic officer of Scotland Yard with whom we have more than once crossed swords and joined hands.
Lestrade.
The same. He called upon me last evening with the bare outline of the affair and with the information that the disputed document was to be placed in my hands this morning for examination. It appears, however, that the matter has taken a turn even more pressing than he anticipated, for unless I owe, we were about to receive a visit from the gentleman whose name figures so prominently in the account.
As he spoke, there came a ring at the bell, followed by the sound of voices in the passage, and a moment later Mrs. Hudson tapped at the door.
"A gentleman to see you, sir, very pressing, he says, and something to do with the newspapers."
Show him up, if you please, Mrs. Hudson.
The landlady withdrew, and almost immediately the door was flung open to admit a man whose bearing and appearance would in themselves have proclaimed his profession.
He was of medium height, but singularly upright, and well knit with the easy carriage of one accustomed to official uniforms, although he now wore plain dress of scrupulous neatness.
His clean-shaven face was pale and marked by lines of fatigue, yet the mouth was firm, and the eyes singularly clear and resolute.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I presume.
Pray be seated, sir, and help yourself to coffee if you will be so good. I understand that you are Mr. Julius Merrow of the Varovian legation.
I am that unfortunate man, and I come to you, Mr. Holmes, because I am told that where the police are powerless, you have sometimes been able to cut a way through the tangle. If my honour, my career, and what is of even greater moment to me, the honour of my country, are to be saved, I believe that it rests in your hands.
You are good enough to rate my powers too highly, perhaps, yet I am quite ready to listen to your story, and if I can be of service, I shall place my poor abilities freely at your disposal. You may speak with complete confidence before my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, who has assisted me in many curious investigations.
I am grateful to find 2 English gentlemen who will at least hear me before they condemn me. You have read what the papers say.
We have read what they report, which is not always the same thing.
Then I tell you, sir, in the most solemn manner in which a man can speak, that I have never stood in any registry office or before any clergyman with Miss Alice Harbury or with any other woman save one, and that one is a lady of my own country to whom I am not yet but soon hope to be lawfully married.
He spoke with an earnestness which impressed even my more cautious mind, and I saw that Holmes regarded him with grave attention.
You absolutely deny, therefore, that you are married to this lady who asserts herself to be your wife.
I absolutely deny it.
Yet she produces a certificate, which appears upon the face of it to bear every mark of authenticity.
The certificate is a lie, Mr. Holmes, but it is a lie so cunningly contrived that I confess it shakes even my own reason when I look upon it. If I had been a less scrupulous man, I might long ago have admitted its claim and bought my peace at the cost of a quiet pension, but I will not enter upon my married life under the shadow of such a fraud, and I will not confess to a falsehood even to save my position.
Very good. Pray tell us how your acquaintance with Miss Harbury began.
I first met Miss Harbury some 2.5 years ago at a series of historical lectures which were given in the Westborough Museum not far from the legation. She was at that time a governess in a respectable family and had accompanied her pupils to the lectures. We fell into conversation over some question of Varovian history upon which she showed an intelligent interest, and we met once or twice afterwards in the same place. I am ashamed to say that I allowed myself to be attracted by her, and in an idle spirit I paid her more attention than was wise. She was alone in the world save for an elder brother who is a chemist attached to the museum, and she clung to my friendship with a dependence which should have warned me. I swear to you that I never made her any promise of marriage, nor did I ever dream that she regarded our relation as more than a passing gallantry.
You wrote to her?
I wrote foolish letters which she has now returned to me, but which I fear she copied before she did so. I met her by appointment more than once at the museum and in its neighbourhood, and even at a certain tea shop, but I never visited her lodgings, and I never stood with her before a registrar.
Do you recall the evening which is given in the certificate as that of your alleged marriage?
Most clearly. It was the night of the private view at the Westborough Museum, when the so-called wedding gallery, a series of Dutch pictures representing the stages of a noble marriage, was first shown to the public. There was a considerable company present, many people of fashion and some from the diplomatic world. Miss Harbury was there with her brother, who was exultant over the success of his chemical method in cleaning the paintings. I spoke with her for some minutes in the gallery and afterwards in a corridor, but she did not leave the building while I remained, nor did I.
And the certificate gives that very date?
It does, and that is one of the things which drive me to despair, for it shows how carefully the fraud has been contrived.
What has been the course of events since then?
About a year after the last of our meetings, she wrote to me saying that she considered herself bound to me in honour, and asking when I would make our union public. I replied that there had never been any union, and that our acquaintance must cease. There were some stormy letters on her side, and then silence. Lately my engagement to the Countess Ilona of Varovia has been made public, and within a week of the announcement this claim of a prior marriage has been sprung upon me with that infernal document to back it.
You are aware that the certificate has been examined by competent judges and that they pronounce it genuine.
So I am told, and it is for that very reason that I have come to you. If the paper were a clumsy forgery, the police could deal with it, but when experts declare that the ink, the paper, the seal are all what they profess to be, there is nothing for the law to lay hold of, and I am left defenseless.
You are by no means defenseless, my dear sir, if you will place yourself frankly in my hands. May I see the certificate?
With a hand that trembled in spite of his self-control, Julius Mero drew from an inner pocket a folded document and laid it upon the table between us.
Holmes put on his reading glasses and bent over it with an absorption which I had seen him show only when some particularly intricate problem presented itself. I watched his long nervous fingers as they passed lightly over the heavy paper and noted how he sniffed more than once as though some odour clung to it. At last he pushed it towards me.
You have a steadier eye than a Watson, and you have some practice in medical manuscripts. Cast your glance along that lower margin and tell me if anything strikes you.
I obeyed, and for some little time I could see nothing save the usual ruled lines and formal phrases.
At length, however, I detected in the extreme corner of faint discoloration a tiny spot of brown, which might have been caused by a drop of some liquid.
There was also a certain crispness in the texture of the paper which did not correspond with the date it purported to bear.
I mentioned these impressions to my companion.
Just so, said he. You are improving, Watson, and someday you may perhaps walk alone. For the moment, however, we will walk together. You see that this document, as it lies before us, is either the most singular piece of evidence ever produced or one of the most ingenious forgeries. Our first duty is to see the lady. You relies upon it, and if I may venture to advise you, Mr. Mero, you will at present avoid all comments to the newspapers and maintain an absolute silence.
I have already refused to say a word beyond a simple denial.
Excellent. You had better leave the certificate with me.
Willingly, if you will but guard it as if it were the very heart of the case.
I shall guard it as I guard my own tobacco pouch. You will oblige me with the address of Miss Harbury.
She is lodging in Bloomsbury near the museum, but I believe that she will readily wait upon you here if you send your card.
It will be simpler if I send a note requesting her to call with her brother. Pray leave the affair in my hands and return to your official duties as far as your nerves will permit.
I place myself entirely in your care, Mr. Holmes, and I shall await the issue with what patience I can summon.
Our visitor bowed and withdrew, and I could not but remark the soldierly carriage with which he bore himself even under the shadow of so dire a suspicion.
When the door had closed, Holmes rose and paced once or twice across the room, his hands behind his back and his head sunk upon his chest.
We shall see the Lady Watson and the brother, and afterwards we shall take a little walk to the Westborough Museum.
You suspect the brother?
I suspect every one and no one as yet. You have studied pathology sufficiently to know that the same symptoms may proceed from very different causes. We must collect our facts.
He seated himself at the table, and in his clear, precise hand he wrote a brief note requesting Miss Alice Harbury and Dr. Henry Harbury to favour him with a visit at their earliest convenience upon a matter of importance.
This he dispatched by express messenger, and we had scarce time to discuss the possible bearings of the case when Mrs. Hudson again appeared to announce the very persons of whom we had been speaking.
A lady and gentleman to see you, sir, and the lady seems sadly put about.
Show them in if you please.
There entered a young woman dressed in black of quiet and respectable appearance, whose pale face and reddened eyelids bore witness to recent distress. Her figure was slight and graceful, and her brown hair was plainly arranged, but there was that in her bearing which suggested both refinement and great nervous sensibility.
Beside her came a man some years older, with stooping shoulders and thoughtful eyes, who carried in his hand a soft hat, and whose whole manner was that of the studious specialist rather than the man of the world.
You sent for me, Mr. Holmes.
I took the liberty of doing so, Miss Harbury, because your name has been very freely mentioned in connection with the public question in which I have been requested to assist. Pray be seated, and your brother also.
You must excuse my sister, Mr. Holmes, if she is agitated, for the ordeal through which she is passing would shake a stronger nature than hers. I am Henry Harbury of the Westborough Museum, and I will answer for it that she is incapable of any dishonourable act.
I am very willing to believe it, Dr. Harbury, for I have found that misfortune is more often the companion of the innocent than of the guilty. Nevertheless, you will understand that when a lady claims the name and position of a man who emphatically denies that claim, the matter cannot be judged upon sentiment alone. You assert, Miss Harbury, that you are married to Mr. Julius Merrow.
I do, Mr. Holmes, and it tears my heart that he should deny me.
You possess a certificate of that marriage.
I do.
Have the goodness to tell us in your own words how the union came about.
When first I met Mr. Merrow, I was governess in a family at Highgate, and my life was very lonely. He was courteous and kind and spoke to me as no one had spoken before, and I confess that I gave him my heart. He told me that his position at the legation was not yet secure, and that for the present he could not proclaim our engagement, but he swore to me that in the sight of heaven I was his wife, and that the time would come when all the world should know it. My brother warned me, but what could I do when he was everything to me? On the night of the private view at the museum, he came to me very late and said that he had found a way by which we could be married at once without publicity. We drove, as he said, to a registry office, where 2 persons whom I did not know were present as witnesses, and there the ceremony was duly performed, and I signed a book as his wife. He kissed me and called me by that name, and afterwards we returned to my lodgings, where he left me saying that for the present the marriage must remain our secret.
You are prepared to swear to this?
As I hope for mercy, I swear that every word is true.
You have seen the book since?
No, Mr. Holmes, I have not, but some time afterwards I went again to the office and induced the clerk to make out for me the certificate, which you have seen.
Why did you not insist upon your rights long ago?
He begged me to be patient, and he wrote that his chiefs were suspicious of any alliance with an English woman, and that I must not ruin his career. He said that when once he had attained a certain post he would acknowledge me publicly. So I waited, and the months went by. Then I heard that he had become engaged to a foreign lady, and that my name was being whispered in scorn among those who had dismissed me before. I could bear it no longer, Mr. Holmes, and I made my claim.
You have kept his letters.
I have returned them to him, but my brother copied them first.
I have them by me, Mr. Holmes, should you desire to read them.
I shall do so presently. 1 point more, Miss Harbury. At what date did this alleged marriage take place?
Upon the very evening of the private view at the museum 2 years ago.
You are sure that it was that evening and no other?
I am most sure.
You drove there in a cab, you say?
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
And you drove back in the same?
Yes.
Did you perceive whither the cabman drove you?
I was much agitated, and the streets were strange to me, but I remember passing a church with a high spire and a square with trees.
And in the registry office, did you see the name of the place upon any notice or paper?
I did not observe it.
Yet you were able later to obtain a certificate.
I knew the approximate date and the name of my husband, and when I described myself, the clerk seemed to understand at once. He went into an inner room and returned with the entry, and from that he made out the document.
Did you pay him anything?
Only the regular fee which he demanded.
Did Mr. Merrow give you any token of the marriage, a ring, for example?
He gave me a ring, and I have worn it ever since, but he implored me to say that it had been left to me by a relative.
You will permit me to examine it?
With trembling fingers she drew from beneath her glove a plain gold band, which Holmes inspected with his lens. There was nothing upon it save the faint stamp of a maker and a worn initial, which might have been any letter.
So much for the ring, said he. Now, Dr. Harbury, I should be glad if you would give me some account of your own share in these events.
It is a painful subject, Mr. Holmes, for I confess that I never approved of this attachment, yet I could not bring myself to break my sister's heart by forbidding it outright. She has suffered cruelly in the past through the gossip of servants and the malice of a former employer, and I live in dread lest any new scandal should drive her to some desperate act. When I learned that Mr. Merrow had cast her off and was about to marry elsewhere, I urged her to assert her legal rights, and I told her that if she shrank from publicity, I would stand between her and the world as far as man could do so. I am a chemist, Mr. Holmes, not a lawyer, and I may have erred in my judgment, but I swear to you that I believed her story as I believe it now.
You're employed at the Westborough Museum, I think.
I am in charge of the chemical department and of the conservation laboratories.
You were therefore intimately concerned in the cleaning of the Dutch pictures which form the so-called wedding gallery.
I was entirely responsible for it, and I may claim without vanity that the result has attracted some attention among experts.
You used, I understand, certain new methods and reagents in the process.
I used combinations of known reagents in a slightly novel manner in order to dissolve the discolored varnish without harming the paint beneath, and the experiment was attended with success.
You will not object if I visit your laboratory.
You shall be most welcome, Mr. Holmes, at any hour, and you shall see whatever there is to see.
That is very frank of you, and I thank you. For the present, I will not trouble you further, but I will ask you to leave with me copies of the letters which you have mentioned, and which I shall examine at leisure with Dr. Watson.
You will not fail me, Mr. Holmes. You will not let him cast me off as though I were a thing of no value.
I promise you, Miss Harbury, that I shall do what I can to arrive at the truth, and that I shall not be swayed by prejudice on one side or the other.
Our visitors withdrew, and for some moments after the closing of the door, Holmes sat with his chin upon his hands and his eyes fixed upon the fire. At last he rose with that sudden accession of energy which I knew so well.
Hat, Watson, and stick. We learn nothing more by conjecture, and we may learn much at the Westborough Museum.
Do you go to see the pictures or the chemicals?
To see that which unites them both.
A cab carried us through the murky streets to a quarter where the houses dwindled, and the tall grey front of the museum rose among leafless trees and iron railings.
It was a private institution lately become public by the liberality of a certain nobleman, and its collections had been largely enriched by bequests which the city museums had not space to receive.
We were shown to the principal gallery where the so-called wedding gallery was hung. 4 noble canvases faced us, each in a massive frame glowing under the softened daylight which filtered through the high windows. In the first, the betrothal was represented, the grave elders seated at a table, while the young pair exchanged glances behind the shelter of a prayer book.
In the second, the marriage contract was being signed, and in the third, the ceremony before the altar was in progress.
The fourth displayed the banquet with musicians and servants, and the bridegroom raising a golden cup. The richness of costume, the sparkle of jewels, and the curious fidelity of the painter to the fashion of his time combined to produce an impression of extraordinary life and splendour. Yet even while I admired, I could not but perceive that my companion's attention was less fixed upon the subject of the pictures than upon their surface.
He moved slowly along the line, peering now at this corner, now at the raising, and lowering his head in order to catch the light at an angle.
Once he sniffed the air, and his thin nostrils quivered.
You observe, I think, the excellence of the restoration.
We turned to find at our elbow a man of middle years with a ruddy face and keen blue eyes, whose frock coat and gold chain bespoke the prosperous curator.
I'm Chisleyhurst, the director, and I have the honour to welcome you gentlemen to the Westborough Museum.
We are much obliged to you, Mr. Chisleyhurst. I am interested in the pictures, but I am even more interested in the manner in which they have been cleansed. I understand that the work was done under the direction of Dr. Henry Harbury.
Entirely so, and the success which you see is due to his skill. We are fortunate indeed to possess such a man.
He used powerful reagents, I imagine.
Powerful in effect, but not in violence. Dr. Harbury will explain it better than I. I believe he is at this moment in the laboratory, and if you desire it, I shall be happy to conduct you there.
You are most kind.
We passed along a corridor and through a narrow door into a chamber lit from above and lined with shelves of bottles and drawers. At a table in the middle there stood Dr. Harbury in a linen coat, his hands stained with the traces of his work.
Ah, Mr. Holmes, I am glad that you have come and that you are able to see for yourself the conditions under which I labour. You perceive that there is nothing mysterious about them.
Holmes glanced around with a swift, comprehensive gaze. There were bottles labelled with strange names, retorts, tubes, and trays upon which fragments of varnish and cotton wool lay in confusion. In one corner a small furnace glowed, and near it stood a metal bin half filled with the ashes of burnt paper and rubbish. Upon a side table lay a smaller panel from the wedding gallery in which the figure of the notary with his inkstand and register was prominently displayed.
You have here all the apparatus of your craft.
I have nothing that you would not find in any modern laboratory, Mr. Holmes. My method consists chiefly in the regulated use of alcohols and mild acids assisted by heat to soften the old varnish and by solvents to remove it. So you see, there is nothing romantic, though the result may please the connoisseur.
On the contrary, I find romance in every bottle. May I ask what becomes of the refuse from your work?
These trays and scraps are destroyed when they accumulate, and the ashes are from time to time removed.
You'd burn your waste paper also.
Naturally, we cannot keep every scrap of paper upon which a note has been made.
I saw that Holmes had stepped towards the bin and that his long fingers had for an instant been plunged among the ashes.
When he withdrew them they were empty, but his eyes had grown brighter.
This small panel interests me greatly. You have not yet replaced the varnish.
Not yet, and you observe that a part of the back is still untouched. It serves me as a control in my experiments.
Exactly so. You would not object if at some future time I were to make a small test upon the untreated portion?
Not in the least, though I do not see what you hope to learn from it.
The hope of knowledge is in itself a sufficient motive to a curious mind. For the present I have seen enough, and I thank you for your courtesy.
We left the museum, and as soon as we were in the street, Holmes drew from his pocket a tiny charred scrap which he held between finger and thumb.
You perceive, Watson, that even among ashes there may remain a trace of what has gone before.
On the fragment I could distinguish faint blue lines like those of a ruled register, and at one corner the ghost of a printed word. It was impossible to read, but it bore to my mind the suggestion of an official form.
We will now return to Baker Street and put our own reagents to the proof.
Back in our sitting room, Holmes drew from his cabinet certain bottles and a small spirit lamp, while I cleared a space upon the table. He cut a slip from the margin of the disputed certificate, another from a sheet of old government paper which he happened to possess, and a third from a modern document.
These he suspended successively in a glass chamber, into which he introduced fumes from liquids resembling those we had seen in the laboratory.
For an hour he watched and noted the effect with that cold and personal attention which made him at such times rather a scientific instrument than a man. At the end he laid the slips side by side.
You observe, Watson, that the fibre of the modern paper is altered by the fumes in a fashion wholly different from that of the older sheet. In the one case the surface becomes brittle and the ink spreads, while in the other it takes upon itself the peculiar crispness and faint browning which we observed in the certificate.
It was indeed so, and when he applied a drop of some other agent to the slip from the certificate there arose a slight odour oddly reminiscent of the air of the wedding gallery.
We have at least established this much, that the document has been deliberately subjected to the action of chemical vapours which are not employed in the ordinary course of legal business. Now the question is who would have both the knowledge and the opportunity to perform such an operation.
You point to Dr. Harbury.
Let us say that the finger of circumstance indicates him, but we must not forget that fingers may point wrongly. We will now invite the assistance of Lestrade, who represents the rough, strong hand of the law.
A note brought the inspector to us that afternoon, and while we awaited him, Holmes continued to pore over the certificate under a powerful lens, tracing here a faint shadow of erased writing, and there a minute grain of foreign matter embedded in the fibre. At last our energetic acquaintance entered in his quick, jerky fashion, his thin figure looking even more wiry than of old.
Well, Mr. Holmes, this is another pretty kettle of fish that we have got into. I suppose you have seen the papers.
I have both seen them and smelt them. I infer that you refer to the case of Mr. Julius Morrow.
The very same, and between ourselves, it is a nasty business. The Foreign Office is all on edge. It Varovian minister is breathing fire, and the lady is screaming for justice. We cannot prosecute the gentleman for bigamy while there is a certificate which seems to prove that he is already married, and yet we cannot very well clap the lady in jail unless we can show that the paper is false.
Then you cannot.
We have called in a first-rate expert and he swears that the thing is as good as gold. He says that the paper is of the right date, that the ink has soaked in like old ink, and that the seal is genuine.
Did he smell it?
Smell it? What in the name of wonder should he smell it for?
Because, my dear Lestrade, it has an odour which suggests that it has passed through a process foreign to ordinary office routine. You have brought the official copy, I presume?
It is here, and I will tell you, Mr. Holmes, frankly, that if you cannot show us the road through this fog, I do not know who can.
You flatter me, Lestrade, but the compliment is misplaced as yet. Pray give me the copy.
He compared the two documents with scrupulous care, and I could see that the differences, if any, were of the most minute character.
You have examined the registry office.
We have, and it is as dull and honest a little place as you could wish to see. The clerk has been there for 20 years, and he swears that he cannot recollect any such couple, but he admits that on a busy day he might have forgotten them. There is no sign of tampering with the books, and the entry is there as fair and square as the rest.
You have considered the possibility that the original writing may have been chemically removed and another substituted.
Our expert says that if anything of the kind had been done, he would detect it in a moment.
Then your expose is overconfident. I have reason to believe that a method has been devised by which ink may be so nearly effaced that only by very delicate tests can its traces be recovered, and that fresh writing may be placed upon the palimpsest without obvious sign of interference. Such a method requires, however, great skill, and the command of a laboratory stocked with certain reagents. Now at the Westborough Museum there is such a laboratory, and there is such a man.
You mean the lady's brother?
I name no one, but I suggest that you keep a very close watch upon the establishment, while I complete certain experiments of my own.
You may be sure that I shall do so. Between the dignity of the law and the dignity of Varovia, I have my hands full.
Lestrade took his departure, and Holmes turned once more to his chemicals while I sat by the fire, turning over in my mind the strange network which was gradually forming around the Harbury family. The more I thought, the more painful did my impression of the situation become, for I could not but feel that if indeed the brother had been driven by affection into some desperate course, the blow which must fall upon him would be terrible. 2 days passed, and during that time Holmes scarcely quitted our rooms save for a brief interval, which he spent at the museum. He returned from that excursion with an air of suppressed excitement, which I knew boded some approaching climax.
We are now, Watson, within sight of land. I have asked Lestrade to be here at 8 o'clock, and I have also sent a note to Dr. Harbury requesting him in the most urgent terms to bring his sister with him at the same hour.
You mean to confront them?
I mean to lay before them certain facts and to see what explanation they can offer.
At the stroke of 8 our bell rang, and almost immediately afterwards the footsteps of several persons sounded upon the stair.
Lestrade entered first, his sharp features alight with expectation, and behind him came Dr. Harbury supporting his sister, whose veil could not conceal the pallor of her face.
Well, Mr. Holmes, we are here, and I gather from your message that you have something of importance to communicate.
I trust you will find it so. Pray be seated, all of ye.
Holmes stood upon the hearthrug, his figure outlined against the glow of the fire, and his eyes shining with the cold, clear light which I had seen in him when he was about to deliver his conclusions.
You are aware, Lestrade, that a certificate of marriage is produced by this lady in support of her claim that she is the wife of Mr. Julius Merrow.
I'm aware of it, and I am also aware that we are unable to shake the authority of that certificate.
On the contrary, we are about to show that its authority is not merely shaken, but destroyed.
There was a quick movement on the part of Dr. Harbury, and his hand closed convulsively upon the arm of his chair.
What do you mean, Mr. Holmes?
I mean that the document is not what it purports to be. It is, in plain words, a forgery, though a forgery of a singular and ingenious kind.
You say that my marriage is a fraud. You dare to say that I'm not a wife.
I say, Miss Harbury, that you have been led to believe yourself a wife, and that you are the victim rather than the contriver of the fraud. I ask you only to listen while I show how the thing has been done.
She sank back in her chair with clasped hands and eyes fixed upon his face, while her brother stared at him with a look which I can only describe as one of fascinated horror.
You will agree, Lestrade, that the certificate has certain peculiarities which strike the eye even of one who's not an expert. The paper is somewhat crisper than we should expect in a document of the age. The margin shows a faint brown stain as if from some liquid, and there clings to it an odour which is not that of mould or dust. These are small things, but they are straws which show how the wind blows. In the laboratory of the Westborough Museum there are used in the cleaning of pictures certain mixtures of alcohols and solvents, whose fumes will in a few hours impart to paper that very crispness and browning, while at the same time removing almost every trace of writing which previously existed upon it. I have myself repeated the process in this room with results which I can demonstrate if necessary. What would be required for a fraudulent purpose would be an old official form, or leave from a register some skill in chemical manipulation, and an opportunity of subjecting the document to such vapors without attracting attention. All these conditions exist in the person and surroundings of Dr. Henry Harbury.
This is monstrous. I protest against such an accusation.
I have not yet finished. When I visited the museum laboratory, I observed it had been partly filled with the ashes of burnt paper, among which there remained a fragment showing the ruled lines of a register and a corner of printed heading. From this and from other indications, I inferred that experiments had been made upon official forms and that their remains had been destroyed by fire. More conclusive still I found upon the back of the small panel from the wedding gallery, which lies even now upon your table, Dr. Harbury, a patch of bare wood, which, he told me, served you as a control in your experiments. Upon that patch there are faint traces of handwriting, so faint that only under the microscope and by the use of a particular reagent can they be read, but they are the very letters of the registrar's signature which appears upon the certificate. It was your test ground, your rehearsal before you committed the act upon the actual paper.
A low cry broke from the chemist, and he half rose from his chair, but sank back again as if the strength had gone from his limbs.
If you desire still further proof, you shall have it. By means which I will not trouble you to follow, I have been able to restore in part the original writing upon the certificate. Beneath the false names there appear in ghostly characters those of an entirely different couple who were married many years before at a parish in the north of England. You had obtained an old register leaf from a batch of legal documents bequeathed to the museum. You effaced the original entry, and upon the blank surface you wrote the names of Julius Merrow and Alice Harbury. Then you subjected the paper to the fumes of your solvent so that it took an appearance of age consistent with the date you assigned to it. That is the outline of your operation, Dr. Harbury, and you will find it hard to dispute.
I do not dispute it. God help me, I am beaten.
His head drooped upon his breast, and the tears ran down his furrowed cheeks.
Henry, what have you done? What have you done to me?
I have done what a man driven to bay would do for the one being he loves. Alice, you know what your life has been, how the world has treated you, and what the loss of this man meant to you. I saw you standing upon the very edge of despair, and I knew that no mere words or threats could save you. The law would not help you, for you had no witness and no proof, yet in your heart you were as much his wife as if a bishop had blessed you before a cathedral altar. I had the means to give you the proof, and I used them. If I have sinned to save you.
This is rank forgery all the same. You will answer for it before a judge.
I am ready to answer. Do with me what you will, but do not let any harm come to my sister.
I never knew. I swore to you, Mr. Holmes, that I was married, for I believed it. You cannot blame me if my brother deceived me as well as the world.
I do not blame you, Miss Harbury. You have been more sinned against than sinning. It is clear that you honestly accepted the evidence which was laid before you, and that you have clung to it as a drowning creature clings to a spar. The true offender sits there, and it is not for me to judge whether his motive lessens or increases his guilt.
The law will not be so tender, I am afraid.
The law, Lestrade, is a machine which works according to rule, for those who guide the machine may sometimes temper its operation. You will consider that no one has been robbed, that no life has been taken, and that the sole result of this unhappy scheme has been to throw discredit upon a gentleman whose life will bear investigation. You will also consider that if this matter be dragged into open court, the scandal may extend far beyond the persons immediately concerned, and may touch certain foreign relations, which it is clearly our duty to spare.
You put it very smoothly, Mr. Holmes, and I do not deny that there is much in what you say. All the same, a forgery is a forgery, and if we hush it up, we may be blamed for weakness.
I did not ask you to hush it up. I asked you to weigh the circumstances and to consult those who are responsible for our relations with the Varovian government. If they consider that the public interest demands a prosecution, I have nothing more to say, but if on the other hand they think that the ends of justice are served by a more private arrangement, then I know no reason why the law should insist upon its pound of flesh.
Well, I will lay your view before my superiors, and we shall see what comes of it. In the meantime, I must take charge of the certificate, and I think also of Dr. Harbury.
I am ready to go with you.
Henry, they will put you in prison.
Better that dear child than that you should have leapt from Waterloo Bridge or taken poison in some miserable lodging. I could not stand by and see you driven to that.
The inspector's face had softened, and even Holmes turned away for a moment to hide the working of his features.
Come now, Doctor, it may not be as bad as you think. Mr. Holmes will put in a word for you, and I will not forget what has been said about your motives. You had best leave your sister in Mr. Holmes's care for tonight.
With that he led the broken man from the room, and we heard their steps descending the stair.
Alice Harbury sat motionless, her hands clasped and her eyes fixed upon the fire.
At last she turned towards us with a weary gesture.
What is to become of me, Mr. Holmes?
You will not be left destitute, Miss Harbury. I have reason to know that Mr. Julius Merrow is a man of honour, and that he deeply regrets the pain which his thoughtless conduct has caused you. He is prepared to make such provision for your future as will ensure you comfort and independence, and I shall see that the arrangement is carried out.
He will never own me.
It is better so. You would not now, I think, care to bear the name of a man who has already given his hand elsewhere. Free yourself in heart as you are free in law, and endeavour to rebuild your life upon a foundation less precarious than the favour of a lover.
She rose slowly and held out her hand.
You have been just to me when others would have called me wicked. I thank you.
A few minutes later she had gone, and Holmes and I were once more alone.
He flung himself into his chair and relit his pipe, which had long since gone out.
For some time he smoked in silence while I sat opposite him, turning over the chain of events in my mind. At last I could not restrain my curiosity.
When did you first suspect Dr. Harbury?
From the moment when I smelt the certificate, Watson. It had in it that faint suggestion of varnish and reagent, which I have associated with picture cleaning ever since I worked upon the case of the Netherlandish panels. When I found that the brother of the lady was a chemist attached to a museum, the coincidence was too striking to be ignored.
Yet his motive?
His motive was written upon his face every time his sister spoke. He feared for her reason and perhaps for her life. There are men who will risk their own souls to save those they love, and he was one.
Do you think that the law will deal hardly with him?
I think not. Lestrade is rough, but he is not without feeling, and the Foreign Office will be anxious to avoid publicity. A nominal sentence, or even a conditional discharge, is the most I anticipate.
And Mr. Merrow?
Merrow will escape with a severe lesson. His engagement may possibly be broken off for princes, and countesses are jealous of shadows upon their names, but he is too useful a man to be wholly sacrificed. He will be kept in a post suited to his abilities, and he will have time in the future to reflect that a gallantry may sometimes cost more than a campaign.
It is a strange world.
It is an instructive one. You observe, Watson, how in this case science has been used both for deceit and for detection. The same reagents which stripped the old varnish from the wedding gallery were employed to strip away the truth from a leaf of paper, and yet it was by the smell and effect of those very reagents that we were able to restore the truth once more.
You were satisfied then?
So far as I ever am. There is always a point at which the human element baffles calculation. I cannot tell you whether Dr. Harbury was justified in his own conscience, but I can tell you that without his clumsy crime, Miss Harbury might well have ended her life in the Thames, and Merrow might have gone forward upon his career without a thought of the havoc left behind. It is not for us to decide whether the balance is even.
You take a lenient view.
I take a practical one. When I see a man labouring under weight which he has taken upon himself for the sake of another and not eager to add to it.
In a few words, Holmes has summed up the philosophy which more than once coloured his actions and caused narrow-minded critics to accuse him of tampering with justice.
I have never shared that view, for I have seen how often his apparent irregularities served in truth the higher ends of equity.
In the present instance, events followed pretty closely the course which he had predicted.
Dr. Henry Harbury was charged before the magistrates with forging a public document, but upon the intercession of influential persons and in view of certain medical representations as to his overstrained mental condition, he was bound over to come up for judgment if called upon, and the case was allowed to drop.
He resigned his post at the museum and retired to a small town in the country where he devoted himself to unambitious chemical researches and to the care of his sister.
Miss Alice Harbury accepted the modest allowance which Mr. Merrow, through the instrumentality of Holmes, settled upon her, and she disappeared from the London world which had been so cruel to her. Of Julius Merrow I heard that his foreign engagement was quietly broken, but that he remained in the Varovian service and was subsequently employed in posts where his talents could be used without attracting social observation. As to the wedding gallery, the pictures continued to delight the critics and the public, and none who admired the cunning hand of the old Dutch master guessed how strange a drama had been played around the gleaming colours and smiling faces. Such was the adventure, which for many years I kept locked among my private papers, fearful lest the publication of it should injure the living or disturb the dead. Now that the shadow has passed, I have thought it right to place it upon record as a further illustration of the powers of my friend and of the tangled relations which bind science, love, and law in our strange modern life.
And now, my dear listener, I must thank you sincerely for remaining with me to the very end of this somewhat intricate history. If the tale has pleased you, I should be most grateful if you would show your approval by pressing the like button, subscribing to this channel, and leaving a few words of comment to tell us your thoughts.
Should you feel inclined to support our continued work in recounting these untold cases, I would humbly ask you to consider a small donation by using the QR code at the lower right of the screen or by following the link in the description below.
In that same description, you will also find a path to other adventures belonging to quite different series which may yet appeal to your taste if you have found some enjoyment in this one. I bid you farewell for the present, and I hope that when next an unpublished narrative from my tin dispatch box is brought to the light, you will once again be at my side to hear how my old friend Sherlock Holmes unravelled another mystery.